Great of you all to be here. We all know COVID has put a blanket over a lot of things, a lot of activities. We are extremely fortunate to be able to use this facility, without a doubt. Thanks to Bill and Mel living here. I have a few things to say that I'd like to say in this celebration of life, and do a little bit of reminiscing. If I can get through it. Dear Ginny, this is a letter. Dear Ginny, remember when we first met? It was at a high school indoor track meet 62 years ago at an armory in Upper Manhattan near the GW Bridge, George Washington Bridge, for those Southern folks who don't know that. I was competing as a senior. You attended as a date of a teammate of mine. Could never understand why he brought you there. A smelly, hot indoor facility with sweaty guys all around. I looked at you and knew you were something special. I found out your name, where you lived, and looked you up in the White Plains phone book 2 days later. That was in the old phone book days. We went out a few weeks after to a place called the Log Cabin in Armonk. Neither of us had been there before. A nice place with, of course, a country band. Of course, we had fake IDs so we could drink. Not very different from today's world. We hit it off as we kept going out and out and out. A few months later, I graduated high school and went to a local community college. You attended your senior year of high school. Remember when I graduated? You remember when I graduated, I got a job at a large chemical company in the area. You went on to nursing school. We continued dating for a few years as the Vietnam War was heating up. All around, I saw guys getting drafted into the Army. I didn't want the Army. I wanted the Marine Corps, where my brother Dick was. I took a leave of absence for work and left for 6 months. I told you we should break up so you could enjoy yourself while I was gone. I guess you did, because I returned on emergency leave when my dad died, and you were in Florida on spring break. When I returned off active duty, I looked you up and we went out. But when we did go out, you added, we've already dated 3 years and you wanted to get married. I remember it took about 60 seconds for me to say, I did too. I gave you an engagement ring the day you graduated, nursing school, and passed state boards. I remember you telling me you were nervous on your first day of work, not because of nursing skills, but because of your being young and taking care of a lot of guys, thinking that they might make all kinds of comments at you, to you. That first day on the job, I remember you telling me, you walked into the room and there were 4 men in that room. And you thought, oh boy. You walked in with your name tag on, V. Diaquani, RN. One of the men called you over and asked if you knew Caesar Diaquani of Mount Vernon. You said, sure, he's my grandfather. He said, good man, I'm in the Bricklayers Union with her. So much for a problem with men. We got married that November 30th, rented a 3.5-room apartment in Yonkers, and started our lives together. Joey came along a year later. We had a crib in the corner of the bedroom for him. I'm sure you don't like to remind you of this, but when I wanted to be a little frisky, you said we would wake up the baby. After hearing this a few times, I talked you into going into the living room.
Good manners, Dad.
About a year later, a year and a half later, we bought a house in Valley Cottage across the Hudson River, Tappan Zee Bridge. A great place to live. Got to know about everyone in the area. We both agreed that God and family would be our priorities. Sean came along shortly thereafter. Christy sometime later. You wanted nursing, but not full-time. Wanted to be home with the kids in their formative years. No daycare for us. Life was certainly not perfect. I would stop off a few times on the way home. I usually got home about 6 o'clock or 6:30 from work. I'll never forget the time. I got there, I'm not sure what time, probably 8 or 8:30 or maybe even 9. And you were standing in the kitchen, picked up the dinner, not utensils, the dinner,
Skillet?
Skillet, pot, whatever we were cooking, whatever you were cooking, went to the front door and threw it out onto the front lawn. I guess I cleaned it up the next morning before the animals got around. A big decision came when the company I was working with said they were moving to North Carolina. We said no the first time. We enjoyed Valley Cottage, we enjoyed our families nearby, and we did not want to move. I got a job, a couple other jobs, and one at another chemical company. And guess what? A year or so later, they said they were moving to North Carolina. So we moved to North Carolina. We weren't going to say no the second time. It was a big move. Nice house, nice area, even though some people live down the block from us. But we were okay.
I love you too, bro.
Kids were not happy at all about the move, losing their buddies and their family, mostly their buddies. Joe was 16 at the time. But as happens, 16-year-olds become 18-year-olds and they're off to college, and life is awful different. I remember the drive home from East Carolina when we dropped Joey off, our first empty person to leave our nest, and we thought the world was almost over with our son not being there.
Me still.
Good riddance. As usual, Joey surprised us again when a few years later, the year he was graduating, which was his 5th year.
It was.
He said he was getting married to Mitzi. I remember Ginny and I looking and saying, but you're too young. Actually, they were older than Ginny and I were when we got married. But you know how parents are. Then Anthony comes along and we said, God, we're too darn young to be grandparents. We can't do that. And then we looked at him and maybe we said, we were right. But no, we looked at Anthony and he was terrific, and then came Maddie, and most of you know the story now. Soon became just an intimate part of our lives. Sean and Vanessa married them in Charlotte. They lived in Charlotte. A few years later, they decided they were going to adopt from Peru. And Marcos and Josue show up. We went to the Charlotte airport as they came out, as the 2 boys. I think one walked and one was... I was always a master of timing. That's the Charlotte airport. We stayed with them only about 20 minutes or so, knowing the 4 of them had to go home and establish their relationship and their family. Christy got married, I think a little before Sean and Vanessa. I think I missed the dates a little bit. Christy, of course, got pregnant and had triplets.
Probably the most traumatic day that we had experienced up to then, as 2 of them were with us about 15 hours before God took them. To top it all off, my brother Dick passed on the same damn day. It was tough that time. The Smiths were immeasurable in their help with us, no doubt about it. Sophia was in the hospital about 140 some odd days.
46.
And I think I missed 2 or 3 days of not visiting her. 1 because of the funeral of Dick, and 2 because of I had a flu or something. Can't visit a preemie when you're sick. Along the way, we bought the condo at Carolina Beach, and we bought a boat. Both of them were to enhance the time that our grandkids spent at the beach with us. Charlotte's about a 4-hour drive, I guess, from Carolina Beach. Remember when Melanie entered our lives. Beautiful, almost seamless. Nothing, Dylan and Ryan, they just fit right in like a glove. Was no problem with either of us on either side of that boat. When I retired about 15 years ago, we spent even more time at CB, Carolina Beach. The drive back and forth was a pain, but once we got there, it was terrific. A few quick items about Ginny, from my perspective, of course. In our later years, we very seldom fought. The one item we did fight about and I finally just gave up, was, believe it or not, in emptying the damn dishwasher. I didn't inspect the plates and the silverware close enough, I guess sometimes, and they were put away under her watchful eye, dirty. So she banned me from unloading the dishwasher, which was not a big deal. However, you might be surprised, the last couple months, I've unloaded that damn dishwasher an awful lot of times.
And you're still not doing it right.
But there's nobody there to criticize.
Your daughter.
Here is an odd one. Whoever comes into our house, we have 3 or 4 different tissue boxes. And whenever Ginny would take a tissue out to wipe her nose or whatever she was doing with it, unless it was totally dirty, soiled, she'd put it back in the tissue box, but in the corner sticking up so she knew it was there.
Too many details.
Just, no, I don't think so. Probably her Diaquani upbringing on being frugal. And then on Wednesdays, I think it was Wednesdays of the month, of the week, she would collect all the grocery store flyers to see what she could save that week going out shopping. And of course, she drove from one grocery store to the next, and all the time it took, and all the gas that you used in doing that. But she paid no attention to that correction, to that detail. There's just one other quirk, being late. There's a wedding book over there. If you look at it, one of the pictures shows Ginny walking down the aisle at church at about 11:25 for an 11 o'clock wedding. She kept that up.
Today was the only thing she came to on
She
time.
kept that up during her life with about everything. She was late. I knew this book was here. She has a book where she wrote what dinner parties we were having, what her menu was for that dinner, and who was coming. She's done that for about 100 plus dinners. And I looked at this just the other day, and I saw that her first entry in the book was January 3rd, 1980, Aud's 40th birthday party. She was just 80 this past January 3rd. That was unique, but it was actually the first entry in that book. Incredible.
What was the menu?
What was that?
What was the menu?
Burgundy, I remember that, but I don't remember everything else. A few quick, well, I just did that, didn't I?
You can do it again.
No, I can't. And then,
Things changed dramatically in December of 2015 with her diagnosis. Here's a unique thing that you may get a kick out of about the diagnosis. She wanted to get on chemo as quick as possible, and we called around, or she called around, see what hospital, what doctor, whatever, and it ended up being Duke. They could get us in the earliest, and she wanted to do it exactly as early as she could to get started on her journey.
First thing we had to do, or she had to do, was on Christmas Eve, they were putting a port into her chest so she could take the chemotherapy. This was actually Christmas Eve at Big Duke in Durham. And cripes, it was like a ghost town. There was nobody in the hospital that day, as you can imagine. As she lay there on the gurney in the room, there was a nurse, of course, looking after her. And she was an older nurse, not as old as us at the time, but not a young kid. And we asked her, Ginny asked, gee, how come you got the short stick working on Christmas Eve like you are? And she had this big complaint about the other nurses. They're younger nurses, they don't work, they don't do this, they sneak around, they didn't want to, etc. And of course, Ginny, being a nurse at that time for 50 years almost, didn't criticize what this nurse said, simply said back to her, you know, that's my experience with the new nurses, is that they come in, they're educated terrifically, they work hard, they know all the new procedures involved in nursing and whatever it is you do. And I love them. I follow, they do great patient care. I learn from them a lot. I guess it's the difference between the glass half full and half empty, and Ginny's attitude on life. We started, or she started, I shouldn't say we, she started up chemo in, say, mid-January. But we all had we had a family meeting with the doctor. Joe, Sean, Christy, etc. And she was given a outlook of 6 months. And being Ginny, she said, the hell with that. I'm not going to be around for 6 months. A heck of a lot more. When she had chemo, each time I went, I think every time that she had it, and it's about a 3 or 4 hour process. I think Ella went to her with her twice, and maybe Christy once or twice. But she'd come out of chemo, she'd go to the store, the grocery store. And she'd go to work the next day. It was incredible. And of course, that's how we got the term "fight like Ginny." She wasn't going to give up. She was fighting this, without a doubt. Faith, family, and fun came up relatively recently, I'd say, as her mantra. As Joe said, he asked her what her mantra was, and she said that. We managed to live, she managed to live pretty well. Well, on that time, we said, it's silly for us to be in Raleigh and Carolina Beach. So we sold both places and ended up where we are now in the townhouse. We had 2 requirements for the townhouse. One was a view of the water, and one was it had to have an elevator. And we got both. Early on in this process, Ginny verbalized, she verbalized 2 things she wanted to accomplish while she was still on this earth. She wanted Sophia to mature and grow, and in the 5 years that have passed, she certainly has. She's not the Sophia of 5 years ago. She's a vibrant young lady now. And she wanted her Maddie girl, or golden girl, to get married. Luckily, Tanner was in the picture and had been for 3 or 4 years, maybe longer. 5 years. He's always been around. And he did one of the most loving things that you can imagine somebody doing. He already had, I didn't know this, but he already had the engagement ring. He already had the engagement ring. And I don't think I've asked him this, but he planned to give it to Maddie either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day.
But being as perceptive and kind and loving as he is, he gave it to her like 3 weeks earlier than that. Maybe it was 3 weeks earlier than that. On a gorgeous night out by the water, with Ginny having a ringside seat to see it. It's almost, I mean, and she was great that night. She was really having a good night. But it's almost like both she and God said, all right, you've gotten the 2 things that you wanted. Now it's time for you to come home. Because it was really downhill after that for her. Oh, here's one other thing to say. When it spread to her brain and she was on radiation, me and Ginny and I, on the way home from radiation, which was killing her, we stopped off at the polling place and voted. She would not miss doing that, her duty. Here's a couple other things I would just add. When we were with Dr. Lee, her oncologist, for 5 years, after the CT scans, we'd meet with her, and she'd tell us the progress or lack thereof since the last one. But over 5 years, we got to know her a little bit. And after going through the technical stuff, we asked her some things, we discussed things about her, and she knew all about Sophia and all about her Maddie and what her 2 desires were. And Dr. Lee said to Ginny, well, didn't say to Ginny, but in the conversation it came out that she goes to Uganda twice a year to work in a woman's clinic for 2 weeks each time. And of course, Ginny, being who she is, asked, what do these women need? And Dr. Lee said, Christ, they need almost anything you can get and give. So here's Ginny getting poison, putting in her. She went off a few weeks later and bought 40 pair of women's underwear in various sizes, colors. A few months later, when Dr. Lee was going again, she bought 40 pairs of socks to bring to Uganda. And then some months later, she bought jewelry, costume jewelry, figuring every woman in the world likes jewelry. She bought costume jewelry. It was almost too much.
Makeup too. Lipstick.
As things started really going downhill, Christy basically moved to Carolina Beach, in a sense, to be with her mother and do some of the heavy lifting that was necessary. Keeping track of, at first she was on all kinds of meds. I had a hard time keeping up with it, but she did. She did it. Thanks to support from Bobby, who unfortunately I'm sure was remembering back to his own situation some 5 or 5.5 years ago with his mom. Sean relieved Christy, I don't know how many times, 2 or 3 or 4. Slept in the bed with her. Got her up at night, doing things
A normal son would not want to do with their mother.
Joe's way was dealing with food. He brought more food over, not every other day, than I think our whole subdivision could have eaten on. It was his way of dealing with it. A great way.
The Duquani form of love.
I skipped over one item in this saga. I remember standing by our kitchen window, looking out. We were scheduled for a video conference in about an hour with Dr. Lee. And outside, I see a truck pull up, and it was delivering some fruit for us. I went down to the front door and got it. It was a delivery from 2 of Joe's great friends, whose wife is sitting in the corner over there, Lisa. Scott, unfortunately, is not here today, couldn't be. And then, after I got the fruit, my phone dings, and there's a text message from Madison saying she was asked to be on the board of directors of She Rocks, which is an ovarian cancer support group, I guess that's how it's called. They raise money, research.
Who wants to watch Harry Potter?
They raise money for research and all, which will allow Maddie to keep tabs on that freaking disease, ovarian cancer, from the front lines. That afternoon, when on the phone call from Dr. Lee, or the video conference with Dr. Lee, is when she told us Maddie was there with us. She had to get the conference set up okay for us. We didn't have a clue, or I didn't have a clue. Christy was there. But Dr. Lee was on the phone, on the video, and said to Ginny, we had to get her out of bed and bring her down to the living room, the couch. And Dr. Lee said,
You've run the fight. There's no more cures that we can give you. There's nothing. It's in God's hands now, Ginny. First, she called Ginny Mrs. Welch, being a true professional as she was.
and Ginny had a hard time perhaps understanding it. She wanted so bad to get back to chemo. She thought that was her answer, the answer, but not anymore. She asked a couple of pretty good questions, and then just sat there staring off.
Her fight was run. Her race was run.
That was probably a couple of weeks prior to Christmas. We still had a Christmas dinner this year, an excellent Christmas dinner. to all the trimmings. I went out and bought the meat for the first time I've ever done that for a Christmas dinner. And we had a great meal. But before the meal, the 15 of us went up to the bedroom and sat around the bed she was in and talked and laughed and cried. I'm not 100% sure she heard us or understood, but it helped us.
She did.
Then we went down and had our meal, and the end was there. 2 days later, on the 27th, God finally took her. She had been really hurting, part of it. Not amazingly, Melanie was standing next to the bed. She was in a hospital bed now, and she looked more peaceful than she was in the regular bed. Hell, that's our vision. I don't know if she was or not. But she had her phone on, playing music, and Amazing Grace was on being played, and that's when she passed. I think the last thing I'm going to say is people here who know folks who are fighting cancer, dealing with that bastard disease, be sure or talk to them about if they're on a member of a support group. She was a member of a support group from almost the beginning, and she went religiously. Is Vicky here? She just left. She met 5, 6, 7 people in that support group. That became quickly her best friend. Vicky just left, who flew from Orlando yesterday to be with this celebration. A couple weeks ago, she was in Carolina Beach with another couple of the support group's folks visiting their Ginny. But if they're not in a support group, tell them get in one or start one, because it was a great help to Ginny and the others that partake in that. And with that, I'll hang it up. Thank you.
Love you, Dad.
Anyone else who wants to say a word, a few words or whatever, is more than welcome.